Buongiorno and welcome to the Author's Preface, the show where we explore the story behind the story, find out how authors are forged. I'm your host, Sam Hale. Thanks for coming back. So, what's good with me? One thing I realized is that I haven't been sharing my socials where you can find me on the internets, and I thought I might do that real quick. Twitter at Sam Hale, Hale spelled Hale. Instagram, Sam Hale, Facebook, Samuel Hale. And if you want to just look all this stuff up on Linktree, it has all the other goodies at Sam Hale. So pretty much if you want to find me on the internets, and I have a page there at Sam Hale, is going to be your ticket. In addition, I just want to thank people for listening and also ask if you are enjoying the show, you've enjoyed listening to the folks I've had the privilege of talking to rate and review the show. That would mean a huge amount to me. I know you've heard this so many times, but a single review really does make a difference. Like every time I get a review, analytics spike. And better analytics means I might get a chance to monetize this thing. And since I'm a teacher, I don't have to tell you that I don't have lots of cash money. So if you want to rate and review, it really makes a difference. Even just a 5-star. You don't even have to type anything. Hell, I'll send you a pre-written review. That way we can just have hundreds of 5-star reviews that are all the same thing. I'm sure the algorithm will love that, and my show won't get kicked off the internets for doing that. I want to do something real quick that's really important to me. So before I do that, if you are new to the show and you want to get right to the pod with Ryan, there is a timestamp in the show notes. So if you're not interested in anything I have to say, you just came here to hear Ryan, totally understand. The show was awesome. I loved every second of it. Timestamp in the show notes. Click on that. You can skip all of this stuff. If you're sticking around, appreciate it. I just have to get something off my chest. It's really been bugging me for a while. And talking with Ryan really kick-started some stuff. Well, honestly, it kind of kicked some stuff in the nuts that needed kicking. It's one of the rare moments where I'm happy I got kicked in the balls. And it kind of has to do with accountability and honesty. Like if today's pod were a chapter in this story of Sam, it would be called Paradigm Shift. Let me preface in my preface by saying that this is not a pity party. This is a good thing. I want to share this with you because it's been really liberating to think about this since I talked with Ryan, since I've been editing this thing and just listening to what he's had to say and really just genuflecting on the entire conversation. It's been very cathartic. I kind of want to make a pledge to you today. Well, not kind of, I do want to make a pledge to you today. And that's because I haven't really been my full self in these interviews. Like I say later in the pod, I've never lied about who I am. I just haven't been my whole self. And I understand, I almost treat these interviews like a first date. You know, you never want to be 100% your self on that first date because you might freak them out. Totally understandable. I've always told people like, yeah, be like 70-80% of yourself because eventually you're going to figure out who you are. So it behooves you to at least give them the appetizer. And then later on, if they want the whole meal, go for it. But I've been treating these conversations like a first date. And on a logistical level, that makes sense. I do not know most of the people I'm talking to. I do not have a deep personal connection with them that goes back years. So I'm trying not to overwhelm them with my personality. And again, that's something Ryan and I talk about is our, pretty buoyant personalities. And sometimes we can kind of dominate conversations. And I've always tried to dial that back. But as I was listening to today's conversation, and I've been reflecting on this for a while, I really haven't been my whole self. I've been that first date Sam that really isn't being honest with who he's sitting across the table from. I just want to be honest with you. The 60-70% Sam isn't enough. It doesn't feel right when I'm having conversations with people and then I listen to the recording later on. I can tell that I'm not bringing all of myself to the table, and my guests deserve better. You, the listener, deserve better because I want to bring out the best in my guests, and they always bring their A game. Ryan's amazing. Terry's been amazing. Everybody has been amazing. But if I'm not bringing everything I have to the table in an authentic way, then I'm underserving my guests because I'm a host. It's my job to be the best host I can be so that my guests can have the best conversation possible. and therefore you can benefit. I want to share a few things with you. One of them is Samuel Hale is not my real name. It's my pen name. And I know pen names are totally common. One of the reasons I did it was purely practical. My first and last name, my Christian name, they are not easy to spell and they're not Googleable. And that's one of the things I saw in pen name advice was pick a name that's easy to Google. In other words, easy to spell. I love my pen name. It feels like the person I've always wanted to be. The Christian name, not Sam, is the guy who does the taxes. Sam does the writing. That's the dichotomy there. But Sam is who I've always felt like I was, the artist, the writer, all those things. So I'm acknowledging to you that Samuel Hale's not my real name. I'm acknowledging that I swear that sometimes I fuck up what I'm trying to say when I'm talking with my guests, and I edit it so heavily that you don't see the warts. And that's just disingenuous. That's not being authentic with you. And it doesn't feel good. I lose sleep over this. Some people may think like, dude, seriously, just relax. It's really important to me. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And if I'm not being honest with you, and sorry to place priorities, but more importantly, with myself, then again, I'm not doing you the kindness you deserve. And again, more importantly, myself. So I want to make sure I'm authentic. Obviously, I'm not just going to swear for the sake of it, but you'll hear it in today's pod. Ryan and I really let her rip because I felt like I was talking to somebody. I could be myself around 100%. And again, for previous guests, I'm not saying I wasn't that person. I just wasn't all of myself. I know that probably sounds contradictory, but I'm a contrarian at heart, or maybe I'm not. My sign off at the end of the show is stay humble, folks. There's two reasons. One is I think humility is a good place to be. That's a good resting place. And my baseline is not humility. I'm a pretty narcissistic person. And that's not always fun to say out loud. I don't think it's ever fun to say out loud unless you're a hyper narcissist. I don't drown in my own reflection, but I do lose myself sometimes in self-grandizement. This is why I say stay humble. Is it's for you, but two-part thing is it's really for me. And humility is about magnanimity, equanimity, being equanimous with the situation. Again, something we talk about in the pod. And I'm just not doing those things. And it's been really stressful, folks. So this is me making a pledge. I'm putting it on a historical record here and now. I'm going to do my best in the future to speak up. I'm going to do my best in the future to say shit if I want to say shit. And if I have an opinion that disagrees with a guest, or if I just have a bad take, I'm going to do my best not to just edit that out of the conversation. If I want to be the best author, podcaster I can possibly be, it needs to start today. And I'm glad it started with my conversation with Ryan Cahill. So who is Ryan? And also, thanks for sitting through that. My God. Ryan, the more important person here. Genres, epic fantasy. Notable works. He has the Bound and the Broken series of Blood and Fire is the book I read and prep for the pod. Loved it. I've been all over the epic fantasy spectrum and have had highs and lows throughout my reading career, from reading Brian Jakes to Jordan to Sanderson. And I found that Ryan's take on epic fantasy was right in the pocket. Loved it. Accolades, awards, best indie novel on the r/fantasy thread of Reddit. For some people that may seem kind of silly, but that's actually a really big deal. Reddit is a huge forum for spec fic authors to not only communicate with fans, but for fans to put down reviews, talk about what they love, what they're reading right now. So this is really cool. Education, Ryan has a degree in pharmaceutical and biomedical chemistry with a background as a biochemist. Hobbies include playing music, so guitar, vocals, keyboard, reading, gaming, and painting minis. And I totally didn't talk with him about this, but I wanted to talk about painting 40K minis, or if he's doing like Age of Sigmar. Never asked. I'm going to die with that regret. I'll get into all the socials at the end of the show, but the short version is if you want to find out pretty much everything about Ryan, from the About section to his publications, you can go to ryancahillauthor.com. Great mailing list. If you sign up for it right now, you'll get a free novella. It's the fall, so it's within the Bound and the Broken series. already got mine. Pretty excited to crack that open. And what did we talk about today? Goddamn, when it's relevant. Imposter syndrome. Just that looming figure, that sword of Damocles hanging over our head. But Ryan has a really great take, which is it doesn't really disappear from him because he's constantly challenging himself. I thought that was such an awesome subversion of expectation. There was a great conversation about monotheism and polytheism, so belief in one God versus multiple, and how that crops up in literature, especially in the fantasy genre. And so we kind of got into that, especially the polytheistic pantheons of antiquity. There were a lot of syllables in that one. I'm going to do a word count on that later. Since Ryan is self published, a lot of the conversation centers on how hard he has to constantly work to stay relevant. And that once you're doing well, say you have a breakout novel or you've been busting your ass and you finally get to the point where you are doing well, people tend to forget how hard you are still working to keep that momentum. This is one of the big parts of self publishing people tend to gloss over is you're also the cheerleader. You're also wearing your marketing hat on top of all the other stuff you have to do. So this idea of relevancy was really interesting to me. We also get into male mental health. And this is something that, while I wish we'd had more time to discuss, I took up so much of Ryan's time and I just didn't want to take any more of it up. But I'm glad we talked about it. This is something I've written about in blogs and articles. And then I also incorporated into my own work because I'm bipolar type 2. And that's not an excuse for my behavior, but it's just a part of who I am and has played a massive role in how I behave. So talking about male mental health with Ryan was refreshing, and just talking with somebody who recognizes what a perfectly platonic, normal, healthy male relationship amongst men can be while retaining masculinity, however you define that. It meant so much to me that Ryan took time out of what sounds like an extremely busy schedule to chat with me. So I don't want to belabor things any more than I already have. Thanks so much for checking out the pod. If you want to follow me on the internets, you can. If you want to rate and review, again, that makes such a huge difference in my day. Let me talk about male mental health. And again, I'm making a pledge to you today that I'm going to do my best to be more of myself. Maybe not always 100%. I don't want to scare my dates off. But starting today and going forward, I'm going to do better. That's why I'm so glad I got to hear Ryan Cahill's preface today. So let's get right to it. All right, and I am joined by Ryan Cahill. Ryan, how you doing today?
Not too bad. I'm alive. First check every morning.
Right on. So I'll have given a more detailed intro at the top of the show, but for people who didn't have a chance to check it out, why don't you break down who you are, genre, novels?
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Cahill. I'm an Irish author, Irish indie author living in New Zealand. I am the author of the Bound and the Broken series, which is currently 5 books, hopefully going to be 6 soon, 3 novels and 2 novellas so far.
All right. Well, I'm really interested to hear your preface. You and I have some couple of through lines in terms of genre, fantasy, and all that good stuff. So let's get right to it. Ryan, one of the questions I really like to ask folks is their old world. So prior to writing, were you fulfilled in life? Did you feel like something was missing creatively? If so, did you know what it was?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I don't think anything was missing. I think I was reasonably fulfilled. Like I was had a great life, friends, family. I had my job and I used my job. Like my job was never something I loved, but it was something that funded the things that I loved. So like I played music in the bars in Dublin and my job paid for my guitar and stuff like that. So I used that as like a functional thing. It's more like after, like now when I look back, I know now that I'm so much more fulfilled than I was. But at the time, I wasn't sitting there going, I need to change everything in my life. But now there's no way I'd ever want to go back.
And I know we'll kind of get into it, but as far as like a career prior to writing, what was it you were doing?
Yeah, so I was a biochemist. I have my degree in pharmaceutical and biomedical chemistry. And so I was working on that for about like 7 or 8 years before any of this came around. And it was one of those, I enjoyed what I did, but never loved it. I think it's hard to love pharmaceutical and biomedical chemistry.
So I was checking out your bio, not only on your website, but just going through your preface and everything. And A lot of the books that you had mentioned were also books that inspired me. So why don't you go over those? What were some of the books, authors, kind of pivotal moments in your life, for example, that inspired you to write?
There's so many. Like I think the first book, unfortunately, it hasn't aged well, that I ever read out loud was Harry Potter with my mom and dad. And my mom's dyslexic, and it was always quite funny because I know anyone who's dyslexic is gonna get annoyed that I say dyslexia is funny. It's not, but this was funny. So she was always reading it to me, but she couldn't pronounce the names. So it was Hermione and Dumbledore, and she was trying really hard, and I can't remember what age I was. I think I was like 5. So because it came out in 1997, and I just took the book and I was like, no, I read now. That was like, obviously I wasn't a fantastic reader at that level. That was one of the first books, and I think my parents would always tell me stories like the Lord of the Rings stuff. And then as I kind of got a little bit older, it was getting into more. I got like Naomi Novik is one of my favorite early authors. I love Naomi Novik, and the His Majesty's Dragon series is just amazing for me. And then as I kind of pushing on and getting more like Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson, and then John Gwynne was a big one for me because I think I was like 20 when Malice came out, and I just devoured Malice.
Which is a crazy, awesome series for people who haven't checked it out.
It's a fantastic series. Honestly, one of the bigger things for me, and I think it's driven a lot of what I do now, John Gwynne was the fastest writer I'd ever seen, and people don't give him credit for this, right? So I'd never hear anyone talk about how fast a writer John Gwynne is. The reason I do is because I was reading these stories that were taking years in between books, and then John Gwynne bangs out Malice, and then straight away the next book comes out, and then the next book comes out, and then the next book comes out, and then he's writing 3 more books, and it was just crazy pace. And so when I'm writing now, the idea of writing like a big book a year to me, or even more than that, like at the minute I'm writing like a book and a novella. Like last year, it was about 500,000 words I published last year, and that's not including the 250,000 word book I published on New Year's Eve. So include that, and it's closing up at 700,000 words, which is over 700,000 words, and which was a lot. But like I think John Gwynne for me was a big inspiration in that, and that I just loved not only the quality of what he was doing, but how quickly he was doing it because I think he was just enjoying it so much.
Did you think this is kind of a question I talked with other writers about, and I've asked myself because the trajectory is not what I anticipated. I always thought I'd be writing sprawling epics that are 3, 5 books, kind of in that Brent Weeks sweet spot. Nothing like Jordan, but early on, did you see yourself as writing standalones, maybe trilogies, or did you already have this kind of nascent idea that you would be writing 5 and then potentially, sounds like 6 book series?
There's kind of two answers for it because I think when I started deciding that I wanted to write and I was looking at this story that I had a very firm idea of the story that I wanted to tell, and I had an idea it was probably going to be about 3 to 5 books. That was the idea that I had in my head, and I knew there was more stories to tell, and I will almost definitely write more books in this world. But outside of that, I think when I got closer to publishing and when I was looking at stuff, like I never queried for traditional publishing or looked at anything to do with that. I was looking around and I was weighing my options and researching. And it was more when I looked at it and said, I want to do indie publishing. That's where the way I want to go. That suits me better. And it just does not reward standalones. It doesn't do it. There's complete outliers like the Sword of Kaigan. There's another one, Dawn of Wonder, I think it's called, that he hasn't released a book in a long time, but it's done very, very well. And then like Battle Mage, but that's 3 out of like what, like 10 million published in the last 7 or 8 years. So for me, it wasn't even an option then. But it didn't change my publishing strategy because I'd already had an idea what I wanted to do, but it kind of firmed it up.
What are your thoughts on that? Because I've been looking more into self publishing. I'm working on a short story right now that I intend to self publish. And you're pretty involved in the self publishing world. You've done really well for yourself, it seems like. What are your thoughts on the fact that, say, somebody who writes one book every 3 years tends not to find the same success as someone who's able to put out content more consistently as a self published author?
Well, I think it's just part and parcel of the industry there in that there's so many factors. But if you look at it from a base level, in traditional publishing, the audience is conditioned. Your readers, like I'm conditioned to expect an author to release every 2 years. Maybe if an author releases every year, they're golden for me in trad. 2 to 3 years, that's normal. I'm okay with that. That's just the way it is. But the indie world, the readers are conditioned for a faster turnaround. It's just how it is. Now, when you establish a name, it's easier for you to then give yourself a little bit more time, but they do expect quicker turnaround. It's just natural in it. And one of the bigger differences in is if you have a lead trad author, not every trad author gets this, but if you have a lead trad author, it's like the lead title for the year, they can wait 2 or 3 years, and then that house has the money to push that launch, right? To push the advertising, to get it in everyone's faces. It's not as simple as that for indies. Now, one thing that I massively push for people, and not everyone likes doing it, and not everyone has found out how to do it properly. Mailing lists are amazing because basically now I have about 7,000 people on my mailing list, and I would have trimmed off probably at this stage maybe 4 or 5,000 people who weren't opening. So it's about 7,000 people. And that means when I do, if I take a little bit longer, I send out an email saying, hey guys, this book is now out. I'm going directly to 7,000 of my readers and they now know straight away. So I'm not relying on Amazon to send an email, I'm not relying on Facebook or Instagram, like getting the algorithm to get the reach. It just goes straight to their inbox. There's loads of tactics, but in general, self publishing, it doesn't trend well towards people who are taking longer to release the book. It's just part of the industry.
Yeah, it should be noted right now that if you sign up for Ryan's newsletter, you get a free novella. Is that correct?
Yeah, you get the fall, which is that was a funny one for me because I just decided I wrote that and I said, you know what, I'm gonna put it as a like a reader magnet, so something that as a reward for people to sign up. It's a full novella. I treat it as professionally as everything else, and it sells in hardback and it sells in paperback, and but the ebook is just completely free, and it's probably had Jesus probably like 40,000 downloads at this stage, so it's out there.
That's great incentivizing, man. I think you've really got a finger on the pulse when it comes to marketing. It's pretty impressive. I've been looking at, like your Twitter, your newsletter, all that stuff, and just seems like you've really got your finger on the pulse. So it's impressive, and it's for me, it's really useful to look at models of what works. So in a way, I guess I'm saying thanks.
No, look. I think for marketing and stuff, it's just one thing that people tend not to have when it comes to when they're starting out, and it's patience. Because I think when you're writing a book and when it's finished, all you want to do is put it out there. But you're gonna do better the more time you give yourself. And I think I always say to people, they're like, "Oh, what's your first piece of advice?" I'm like, "Well, if you have your first book, just wait, because once you start that snowball rolling down a hill, it's gone. So if your book doesn't do well, you're freaking out with pressure and trying to arrest what you see as this downfall. And if it does do well, you now have loads of readers waiting on the next book, and you're still under pressure. Whereas the only time you don't have pressure is before you've done anything. So if you take the time to research and understand what you're doing, I took like 6 months to read and understand everything to do with the indie world, the trad world, to do with marketing, book covers, mailing lists, websites. Like I learned how to learn small amounts of coding and how to like format in HTML before I was able to get access to better formatting softwares. And so just take the time.
I want to segue into something too, because you and I, our trajectories are pretty similar in a lot of interesting ways. You mentioned that at one point you were able to do a lot more writing because you had a job you'd been hired way out in advance for. And I had a very similar thing where I was working out in the Middle East, and it was in a school that didn't quite have its student body, their roster there yet. And so I found myself with a lot of downtime, and that's when I really started getting into writing. Could you kind of go into that? Because this is not the first time I've heard people having this situation. I've had doctors getting hired at hospitals that weren't open yet doing the same thing.
Yeah, so basically, I was working in one place and I got an offer for another one, and I was working on a microbiologist at that time, and I was the first microbiologist hired globally for that company, and they just hired me like 6 months in advance to make sure I was there, and they would not give me work. So like I'd be emailing saying, "Hey, what can I do? How can I be proactive?" It's like just hang tight, and no joke, I watched maybe like 3 or 4 different seasons, entire seasons of Netflix shows, and then I said, this is just such a waste of time. Like, cause I was getting annoyed. I was just like, oh, this is my time. Like, I can't get it back. Like, it's such a waste of my time. Fuck it. I'm gonna write that book that I wanted to write. And that's when I just sat down and started like writing little pieces. And I didn't like jump straight into the writing. I was writing like characters and history. And then I went home and I got like a piece of card paper and pencil and started drawing a map. And then I started researching how to draw maps. And then I went and bought fine liner markers. And then after about 100 attempts, I now had a pretty workable map. And then I was working off that. And yeah, that just kind of kept going. And it was tipping away slowly until COVID hit. And then when COVID hit and I was forced to spend more time at home, I was just writing like crazy.
Doubts, Ryan. So I don't know about you, but I've experienced a lot of this where I had doubts that were typically self imposed. Did you experience the same thing? Were there obstacles that were keeping you from taking writing as seriously as you would have liked?
Yeah, well, I think it's the same for a lot of people. Like the first one when you go to do stuff like writing is what the hell am I doing? And I think it's pretty natural because people always go, well, I have a degree in for me, like I have a degree in chemistry. Like I don't have any degree in writing. Like I don't know what I'm doing. And I kind of just ended up pushing past it by being like, I'm doing this for fun. It doesn't matter if I know what I'm doing. And I think those kind of things will always come around. They're just part and parcel of, I'm aware I've said part and parcel like three times, but it's a great usage. But it's one of those, I think one of the biggest doubts people have when it comes to taking it seriously is, can I make money off this? Can I make a living off it? And especially if you spend time around Twitter, people are really, really good at telling you what doesn't work for them and what didn't work for them and just what doesn't work. All right. So you get pretty negative stuff will come in the whole time. You can't make money off indie writing. And then it's like you can't make money off any writing. And then it's you can't make money off fantasy. And I'll tell you one thing. You can make money off indie writing. You can make money off fantasy. 100%. You absolutely can. But it's not everyone. That's the reality. It's like anything. And no matter what profession you have, everyone in that profession isn't going to succeed. And even now, like when I'm writing, like one of the biggest ones is always going to be like an imposter syndrome. I used to think, and people ask me now, they say, does it disappear? It's like, honestly, no, and I probably never will. And I think it's one of those for me that I've realized that the reason it's not disappearing for me is because I'm constantly challenging myself. I think if you're not moving forward as an author. So like I know with each book, I'm asking more of myself and I'm asking me to do something new. I like to try out different things in my novellas. So my most recent one was larger time jumps. And then so I'm freaking out, telling myself I don't know what I'm doing because now I have to find a way to make these characters naturally advance in a reader's mind while still taking a lot of the core elements that would have happened over the last 5 years that we haven't seen because I made a 5 year time jump. It's a totally different skill and it gives me imposter syndrome. And I could have just not had the time jumps. But then again, writing is meant to be fun. It's meant to be what you love. So I want to challenge myself in what I'm doing. That kind of stuff's there. And I know there was once, so this isn't like a personally imposed one. Before I released my first book, I trolled the internet to try and find, or trawled the internet. I probably trolled the internet many times as well, but I trawled the internet looking for beta readers, right? Which is what a lot of people find it hard to get because it's difficult. You have to convince strangers to donate their time to not only read your unfinished book, but it's finished but not polished, but like your unpolished book, and comment on it and tell you what you've done wrong. And it's not easy. Like I think I got 10 and three of them finished the book, my first book. Now, this is the difference. Now, 6 books down the line, I have 24 beta readers and all 24 finished the book. And before I had 10 and I got three. So I had some ARC readers as well, some advanced readers. And so everything was working and it was all going, wheels were spinning, and the book was being published in a week. And I get an email from an ARC reader, and it was basically just, I'm really sorry to tell you, this book is not fit for people to read. It is not fit to be published. It needs so much more work. There's a lot that needs to be done. The book is nowhere near ready. Okay, and I'm a week out from launch. So I've already gotten loads of really great feedback from it, but it's just one of those things I think a lot of writers need to understand. And a lot of people, I think most people do understand. It's human nature. You could have 10 people tell you you look fabulous today. One person tells you you look like a beaten tree branch and you will be sad all day. So I think like I got that email and I ended up like I went for a walk, like a really long fucking walk, and my partner was messaging me. She said, "Where are you? Where are you?" And I went for a walk and went for a walk with one of my friends, and we just talked about everything. And then I came back and I was like, "Fuck that bitch," just publish. And like, yeah, when I look back on my book, I think when someone looks back on their first book after writing so many of them, you'll always see flaws. There's always problems, but I'm damn proud of it. And it's just one of those where people will always get in your head and get you down, and they'll push those doubts into you too. And it's a weird thing where it's hard to trust yourself and have that kind of, some people trust themselves too much and they won't take any advice or criticism, and that's not the way to look at it. There's so much you can take, from what other people, even if you don't agree. I have my editor now, and she's amazing, and there's things I don't agree with. But even when I don't agree, she'll say, "Oh, you have to change this and get rid of this," and I mightn't agree with the comment, but I'll try and analyze what she's saying from a different perspective. And many times I've made the chapters a lot better based on what she said that I didn't agree with. But then when I looked through it and said, you know what, is it perfect? Absolutely not. And how can I fix it using what she said? It's those kind of things. So confidence is key, but also knowing when you're being overconfident.
So you had this free time, you're using it wisely. So what kinds of baby steps did you start taking toward becoming a committed writer, Ryan?
Like it took a while. Like I think everything for me when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do is at first I just wanted to do what I was loving, what I was enjoying. So I wanted to make my world deeper, make everything richer, feel more like it was true. So like I said before, I was drawing maps until I was able to really draw them. I was developing characters, religion, history. I was spending hours and hours and hours researching, researching, and researching. And I went from only listening to music to just listening to podcasts, listening to Mark Dawson's self publishing formula, listening to Six Figure Authors with Lindsay Baroker, and just constantly immersing myself in everything to do with self publishing, even though I was a long time away from self publishing, just trying to understand everything that was going on and just making sure that I was kind of eating, sleeping, and breathing writing and publishing long before I was writing and publishing. And for me, that was like when I look back now, like a subconscious conditioning into teaching myself that this was possible. Because I haven't even finished my book, but I know how to market it in 7 different ways. I know what all the different promo sites are. I know how to set up a newsletter, but I haven't set up a newsletter. So it's kind of teaching yourself that this is feasible, it is possible, and listening to those kind of success stories as well. Because Lindsay Broker and everyone else on the podcast, they're all very very successful authors, and they have other authors come on who are successful. It's kind of teaching myself, yes, it's possible. Here are people directly who I'm listening to who are not only succeeding but teaching everyone else how to succeed. That for me was massive. And then as I was writing, I think a big step for me was obviously for anyone finishing the book.
Do you remember where you were, what was going on when you finished your first book?
Oh, 100%. I was in the same place I had been through all the beginnings of COVID. I was sitting in a chair at my desk in my kitchen, about 2 feet from my partner, who was at her desk at the kitchen table, across from our housemate, who was at his desk at the kitchen table. And that was my life for like 2 years in Ireland. I think it depends with people. It's a very short thing for COVID, but I don't know, a lot of other countries didn't kind of do it the same way Ireland did. For a year and a half, we were in lockdown and we weren't allowed to go 2 kilometers from our home. And then it was switched to 5 kilometers. It was so tight that it was 1.7 kilometers from our house to a wood fire pizza place as the crow flies. But there was a river in between. And it was 7 kilometers to drive there, so we couldn't go. So we carried a kayak down to the river and kayaked across and got them to place the pizzas into a spare kayak.
Oh my God.
So it was kind of cheating, but like we got on local news, which was pretty fun. Yeah, so that was it was a massive moment for me. But I think almost the bigger moment was letting the first person read my draft, like, and just literally like opening your heart and saying, "Just fucking cut me."
Who was that person?
He's my best friend, and he's actually moved over to New Zealand now, and he lives with myself and my partner while he's doing a master's. But we talk about it now, and it's so funny because the first draft was dog shit. It was so fucking bad. And even now, because the difference now is I would do like my draft and then I do a once over where I apply notes. So I would go through, and as I'm doing my draft, say I decide a character doesn't die, I don't fix it, because what I've learned is when I go back and fix it, I take too much time. If it's a big thing where it shifts the paradigm of everything, I'll fix it. But normally I'll say, go forward as this character is alive. I'll leave a note there. And then all it means is when I do my second pass, I come back and make the character alive. So I'll do all that sort of stuff and leave my notes as I go, and then I'll come back to my second pass and clean up, and then I send it straight to beta readers. Then it comes back to me, and I will clean it up based on their notes, straight to my editor, clean it up off her notes, and then I publish it. Whereas with the first one, I probably had like 7 drafts, and they were absolutely terrible. And it's just so funny now when he's saying when he saw that first draft, he was like, "Oh shit." Please don't tell me this is what he wants to do for a living. And now the difference in how clean the drafts are is massive, because there's so many things you don't think you don't know, if that sentence makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of learning full stops and commas in speech quotes, which goes where, what happens, how do you do this? Is it capital letters? Is it small? Like stuff that you just innately think you know because you're a reader, and then you're going to do it, and you're like, oh man, I don't have a clue what I'm doing here.
The semicolon is still my best friend and worst enemy because I think I know how to join two independent clauses. I have no goddamn idea sometimes.
I just honestly, I just put commas in wherever I feel like it, and let my editors deal with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I have an editor and I have a proofreader, Taya or Sarah and Taya. Yeah, I said they probably want to hang me from a rope somewhere. Like it's just half their life is cleaning up commas and M dashes.
Oh, I love M dashes. Oh, I love M dashes. I use them way too much.
M dash is almost at this stage. I'd say about 50% of my M dashes are used correctly, and the other 50% is like me leaving like an editorial comment saying, "Please fix."
That's exactly how I feel, man. This is such a relief to hear somebody else say this. It's so cathartic.
Man, it's like that. It's like that. It's like the meme when you have is it Isildur and Elrond, and he's like, throw it, cast it into the fire, and he's like Isildur holding an M dash. He's like, no. It's just like that's my life.
I feel so relieved hearing this. I wanted to come back to something. You were talking about history, languages, religion, and I always want to know where people are pulling from. Sometimes it's a singular culture at a singular period in time. Sometimes it's an amalgamation. So for the Bound and Broken series, was there a particular culture you were pulling from, or did you kind of cherry pick?
There's loads. So I kind of wanted my world to be as vast as ours. So even on the main continents that have the home culture, the area where the first main character is based, is kind of based off a lot of Celtic influence, a lot of Irish influence. Like I would still have them use mam and dad, and which is very old Irish as well. It's become modern English, but it was used for a long time. And then I'll have areas that are Greek influenced, areas that are Norse influenced. And I think the one thing I always have is like for religions, I just feel like a pantheon of gods is more understandable than a singular god. And there'll always people who give out to me and prefix everything by saying, if someone has, like I said to you before we even talked about any of this, like if someone has faith, I am so happy for you. At the best time in the world. Like faith is amazing. If you can find something that gives you that kind of vitality in life, that's brilliant. It's just for me, when it comes to singular gods, the reason I find the pantheons for me more believable is because I'm an apathetic agnostic. So like I'm not atheist. I just don't care. I don't give a shit. And like if someone shows me like true evidence, I'm like, all right, cool, sweet, yeah, I'll follow you. And I think for me, when I look at them, even if a singular God existed, I would find it really hard because I wouldn't want them to exist. Because if a singular God existed, say for like the Christian God, is like this all knowing, omnipotent entity, that means that he created cancer. That means he created cancer in children. That means all the horrible things because he's all knowing, based off what people say, and he's omniscient. He did it on purpose. Whereas, like, if I go to like Norse mythology, I'd follow Norse mythology in a second because, like, Thor is a drunken idiot who is like, the god of thunder, and but he's flawed. They're all flawed, and I think that's the thing for me that makes them more believable. So when I go to write them, why you'll almost always see in literature, which is a trend that I've found, is that the religions in literature with singular gods are almost always evil.
Yeah.
And you'll find that it's a trend you don't even think about, but then when you read the books, you'll see it's coming up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's the multiple gods that tend to be more varying because they're flawed characters and it's more understandable. So if Thor and Loki existed in this world, all the problems in this world, it's more understandable that someone would believe in them, would believe in the gods because they didn't cause the problems. So for me, almost a trend in almost all the religious stuff in my books is pantheons. It's multiple gods because for me, I can understand more why people would kind of completely believe in them.
Well, it's an expression too of that worldview too. Like if you have a god whose entire thing is hedonism, then that says something about your culture. Like that places a certain kind of weight and value on that thing. And I'm totally with you here, man. The pantheons that I'm looking at right now, the Phoenician pantheon from like North Africa all the way to the Levant, they're really interesting because a lot of them have a lot of them are just sharing traits and typically faults with a lot of the Greco-Roman pantheons. And I just find it so interesting. I mean, people like Zeus, he's a terrible person. He is an awful person.
Is horrendous.
Yeah, yeah, he is. And yet, when you hear somebody like Heracles or anybody talking about them, there's a ton of reverence, but there's also this edge to it. You can hear that, again, these are really human. Even the demigods are aware that these full blown gods are, well, sometimes they're pieces of shit.
Yeah, but that's what I. It's not what I like, but from a literary perspective, when you're crafting these worlds, and for me, it's just it's more believable, and I think that's why people like reading about them is because they're flawed characters, like as gods, and it adds a human element to being a god, and it takes the culpability away from this magical entity and places it on humans, which is something I appreciate more because if a god is omniscient and all knowing, then you don't have any accountability for what you do because the god is letting you they're letting you do it. I think when you have this pantheon of flawed characters and gods who don't control everything, but they're very goddamn powerful. Strange choice of words for me, saying goddamn powerful, but you know, they're incredibly powerful, but the accountability for your actions are on you.
Yeah.
And I think there's still a little bit, it's like there's plenty of people across the world who've justified what they've done because of what Odin said or what Loki have said, but in general, I just find it a bit easier for me.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I totally agree with you, man. One thing I want to kind of go back to in terms of, you kind of testing the waters here is committed word goals and markers. Because for a lot of us, this is kind of I don't know if rite of passage is the right phrase for it, but it really is kind of a mile marker. What were your first word goals and markers for, say, for that night, having a good writing session? What did those look like?
It kind of always depended. Like when I started off, I just wanted to get a few hundred a day. And I found if I allocated myself a slot of hours, I always use this example, and it's because I'm boring and have a history in chemistry, is that I feel like time is like a gas in that it will fill the volume of whatever container you put it into. So if I give myself 3 hours, it will take 3 hours. That's what it will take. If I give myself 1 hour, I could do the same workout in 1 hour. But if I give myself five, it's going to take five. And so I tried to avoid giving myself hour counts. And I was always saying, okay, so I want to kind of get like 400 words. And even sometimes that would take way too long. And eventually, as I was going through it, I discovered the Pomodoro method, which is just kind of like doing things in interval sprints.
The tomato timer.
Yeah. And for me, that brought me from about 300 words to about 2,000 to 2,500. Quite easy because now I say easy. Sometimes it can be very hard. Sometimes an entire day of writing won't get me 2,000 words. It just depends. If I try to be prepped beforehand. Like I'm not a big planner, but I always know the ending of a book and I know the main beats in the book. And then when I do a chapter, I like to have a general idea of what happens. I could say they talk about X, but I won't actually plan out the conversation. So I'll do that. And for me, then I started setting 500 words in 30 minutes. And then I would take like a 10 or 20-minute break. And I found it allowed me to hit that count so much more consistently. Like there's always days where it fucks up, but it was way more consistent when I was doing it. So I think that was massive for me. And like now I probably when I was over the last year and a half, I was probably writing between 2,000 and 4,000 words a day, every day, 7 days a week. And that was insane and intense. And since I released my most recent book, I've tried to peel it back and I've claimed weekends again. So I'm writing a bit slower because I'm losing 2 days a week, but I have more sanity. I'm healthier, and my partner doesn't want to shank me.
Setbacks. Were there any kinds of setbacks that presented themselves on your writing journey? Things that were kind of gut punches for you?
There's like when you think like a gut punch, it's like what I was talking about with that arc reader who emailed me a week before my launch. That was that was a that was a sack of dicks. And the reason I use that phrase is because there's not one person on the planet who goes, "Yeah, I want a sack of those things." That's the phrase I like to use. It was a sack of dicks. But in general, like there's a lot of smaller setbacks on the way for me, things that made it hard. And I think it's one of those things that I know I face sometimes when, like I said, I've released, it will be 6 books now coming soon. And we just found out there recently that it's just past 100,000 sales since we launched the first book, which was March 2021.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. Thank you very much. It's weird, but great. And I think when you reach a certain level of you've been doing well, people kind of wash away how hard stuff was.
Hmm.
And I think it's something that people need to know when they're doing it, that I know it's hard right now, but you're working towards something. So like I know when I was doing it, now that I'm working full time as an author, it is easier for me. People were saying, "Are you getting so much more writing done?" I was like, "No, I'm actually not. I'm getting the same amount of writing done. I am just a healthier human being. Like, and I sleep more." So between March 2021 and just there, January. So say March 2021 and the end of 2022, March to January 2023, I was sleeping on average about 4 hours a night. I was working all the time. So I would get up at like probably like 8, and then I'd probably start work around 9 or 10, and be it writing, editing, learning how to do stuff on my website, learning how to format, do other bits. I'd be working then straight till maybe 3 p.m. I'd go to the gym, and then I get back and have some food, and about maybe 5 p.m. then, sometimes till 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's now when I was even when I was full time up until recently. But when I started, I was working 12-hour shifts. So I was getting up at 6 a.m. and then I was driving to work for 7 a.m. I'd finish work at 7 p.m. I would get home at half 7. I would go straight to the gym. I'd get back at 9, eat some food, and then from 10 p.m. I would work from 10 until 3 or 4 in the morning,
Jeez.
and then I would get up at 6 and go to work at 7, and I would do that, and then the shift would flip. So I would then get up at like I'd finish my shift at say 7 a.m. I get back at 8 a.m. I would go straight to sleep, and then I would wake up about probably about half 11, 12. So like 4 hours later, about 12, and straight away then I would go to the gym, come back, eat some food, and then I would write from like half 2 until like quarter past 6 in the evening, and then go to work at 7 p.m. And that was repeated, like rinse and repeat consistently for like over a year, and it was crazy hard, like crazy. I've never been in such a strange place in my life, but it was worth it. But it was a massive setback, and it was one of those where it was like I don't recommend people to do it like that. It was horrible. It was a really it's a massive sacrifice. But I think understanding that writing is a sacrifice, like pursuing anything that you love like that is a sacrifice. That was a setback because it was a setback to understand that holy shit, like this is what I have to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it. You don't have to do that to get success. But I knew that I wasn't going to be happy with a slower pace. That's just who I am. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Yeah, that was really damn hard. I think that, and then going through like serious waves of imposter syndrome as we go. Yeah, but I think that's the big thing for me. Some people have had different struggles. I think I've been quite lucky in that, I was working full time in a good job, so I wasn't floating in cash, but I wasn't starving. So I was able to write. So my one was with that, and I think there's always this thing online about authors and reviewers and this and that, and like personally, I don't ever respond to negative reviews. I just don't think there's a point in wasting energy, and also it can deter reviewers. I do think reviewers need a safe space, but also I do think there's a point when some reviews go from being reviews of the book into being personally attacking. And you do need a safe space to be able to review a book. You don't need a safe space to be able to slate an author as a person. And I think they're slightly different. I still wouldn't respond to them because it's not a professional thing to do. So yeah, sometimes they can get pretty horrible. I think it gets left out of some kind of the discourse around it in that, there's a human behind all those books, and I've seen it with a few of my friends. I've seen how hard it's hit them, and yeah, I've had them before, and they've been pretty tough. Some of them to get past, and I've kind of trained myself now where I do not read reviews for my first book. I don't, unless I've been tagged in them. The thing for me is the reason I picked my first book is because it's the one that I have the most not concern over, but it's the one that I have the least confidence over because I grew as a writer as you move on. But then also when you're leaving reviews for the second, third, fourth, fifth book, the majority of them are people who enjoyed your first work. So at the very least, if they're negative, it's probably from a true criticism point of view. That doesn't mean there's no true criticism for the first book. There's a lot of true criticism for the first book, but I'm just more likely to come across something really horrible. Whereas I'm not likely to come across that in the second and third one. I can find bad reviews. I never have a problem with a bad review. And it's one of the things where I've seen in some bigger competitions. Like I've seen it, this is probably the first time I'm saying this out loud, but I've seen it with like the SPFBO, where sometimes there's these reviews that come through, and it creates like a bit of chatter, And people are like, oh well, you know, what am I meant to do if I can't leave a negative review for this book? Like, I'm here to honestly evaluate it. And I'm like, yeah, give it 1 star. Say it was crap. That's fine. Leave a negative review. I think what gets skipped over is that you can leave a negative review without being horrible. And I think sometimes I've seen that where it's like, you don't like the book, you can point out all the flaws in the book. That's not a problem. But like, you're writing here, you're creating a piece of content the same as I am. So like, if I'm creating a piece of content like a book and you're able to review it, everyone else is able to have an opinion on the piece of content you create, which is the review. And in this case, if they're horrible, they're horrible. It's not to do with being a negative review. I think it gets that weird rap. Negative reviews are totally fine. That's part of reviewing. If everyone had to leave a positive review, even for authors, it would be bad because you've nothing to challenge yourself on. Like, sometimes one of my favorite things ever is like seeing a reviewer who left like 1 or 2 stars for the first book and then gave 5 to the second. And I'm just like, fuck yeah, you know, convert.
Yeah.
I was out on a mission. Yeah, reviews get a weird one, but I think from an author perspective, it can be quite difficult when you see the ones that are just plain mean. They're horrible. They're like attacking you. That's different, and I think they've hit me with some setbacks over the course of the last 2 years. There's been 3 or 4 where I've read them, and I've gone on those long walks, and like those self-exploratory walks.
Yeah, kind of a long dark night of the soul.
Yeah, kind of, and I think that just gets forgotten sometimes. That you'll have an author who'll read them and go, I'm gonna have to reevaluate my whole life right now.
So, going pro, Ryan, when did you realize you had become the full-time author you'd always wanted to be? Was there an aha moment to it? Did it happen more organically?
It's a weird one because even right now, it still feels really fucking weird. Like, people will say, like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'll be like, Am I a dickhead if I say author? Is that is that a thing? Like, am I allowed to say what I do? Yeah, I've kind of slowly gotten to the stage where that's what I say because that is what I do. I do it full time. I do it all day, every day. But it has kind of slowly crept in. While at the same time, it kind of happened in phases because when I moved to New Zealand, I had to quit the job that I was in. So I was working in a pharmaceutical company, and I had to quit it. So then I moved over to New Zealand with my partner, who's from New Zealand. And then when we got here, it went into 6 months of full COVID lockdown in New Zealand. New Zealand's only big lockdown. So even if I wanted to get another job in the industry that I'm in, I wouldn't have been able to. So I just said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm full time for the minute. I wasn't earning enough to be full time. I was probably earning like the bare minimum to be full time, but if something went wrong, we weren't going to eat food. No, Amy had a great job, so never mind. Amy earned more money for me for quite a while there, which is amazing. She's an absolute legend. So I was doing that, and screw it. Amy was like, look, if it doesn't work, I can pay for stuff, and then you can go back to getting another job if you want, when you want, because she was unbelievably supportive of me trying this. She's like, you wanted it so bad, you love it so much, you'll kick yourself if you don't try as hard as you possibly can. So it was kind of forced into full time in that I moved country and then couldn't get another job because of COVID. So I went full time, and then it was good, but it wasn't really good until I released the second book. And then I released the second book, and like my sales like quadrupled. And then I was writing and I released the next novella. And then when I just recently released my third main book, those sales then tripled. It's weird because it's slowly gone over time where I've understood what's happening, but then there was these markers where it was quite clear stuff had happened. But I think some of the biggest stuff for me now is seeing stuff like I get some pictures of tattoos and stuff,
Oh, awesome.
and that's fucking mind blowing. It's insane. Like, I see it and I'm just like, what is happening? How is this possible? And it's a really cool story where one of my readers was saying she has a tattoo on her leg. It's not a dragon, it's a massive phoenix, but in the middle of the phoenix she has a saying from my book in the language that I created, which is Drale Daldrir Rakina Nedalva, which means dragon bound by fire, broken by death. And she has that across her leg. And she said that she went back to her desk and she had an email from someone who was sending her something about work, and they signed it off, me and Athir till DR, which is in the language in the book, which means my soul to yours. So that was fucking weird because like I have a Discord server, and she's writing that in this saying basically some random person she didn't know in her workplace saw her tattoo and responded with the language from my book. That only happened a few weeks ago, and that properly blew my mind. I was kind of going, this is insane. That's not possible. It cannot be happening. It really is. It's an accumulation of all these things, and I think it's only recently where I'm sitting there going, this is real. But the thing with writing is it's real, but it could slip out from under me at any time. I think people forget that. People are like, oh yeah, well it's fine because you can release a book and it's all good. It's like that is not how it works. Like if I take too long between this book and the next book, it will fade. Like 100%, it will fade into obscurity. If you start releasing bad books, like you take your foot off the throttle at any stage, and it can absolutely fail. So it is scary, always terrifying, but it's slowly starting to come to a realization that this is real.
Do you think that because I have this kind of, I call it the Catholic cattle prod. I was raised Irish Catholic, and I get this kind of guilt. Like if I don't write enough that day, and then let's say I play video games for 3 hours, I feel pretty shitty about it. Do you feel like if you haven't put enough effort into it, or if you don't feel like you're getting things out as soon as they need to be out, does that start to affect you mentally? Does that motivate you? Because for me, like probably the only reason I've finished any of my work is because of guilt. Has that sensation motivated you in any way, or been just straight up detrimental?
Yeah, I think it does both, 100%. I think you'll be hard pressed to find authors who've been writing, authors who have been pushing themselves, like really pushing themselves to make this a career. I think you'd be hard pressed to find one who doesn't feel that way. Anyone I've talked to, it's if you're doing anything, like anything at all, if I have any fun, it was a problem. And it's the reason why now I'm taking my weekends off because like my partner is she's incredible and she does everything she can to support me at all times and I try to support her and everything she does and but it's one of those where it can get you so mentally that you go to a movie and you'll sit in the movie the whole time and god fucking forbid you don't like that movie, because if you don't like that movie you've now sacrificed 2.5 hours of writing time for a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those where everything became that way. It was like, if I'm gonna sacrifice writing time, I better be doing something I really fucking love. That's not healthy. And it's so hard for people to get out of that mindset because you're chasing a dream, a tangible dream. You're tracing it so hard that anytime you're not doing it, you're feeling that guilt because you feel like you're letting yourself down. You're going, this is in my hands. I can do this, but I'm the one choosing not to do it. And I think there are times when it's motivating me like crazy. Like when I was doing, every time I come to the end of a book, and even like through this last year and a half, this last 2 years, my general motto for myself has been, if I'm going to fail at this, it's not going to be because I didn't work as hard as I possibly could. If I'm going to fail, it's because of someone else. It's not because of me. Like if I'm going to fail, it's because people didn't like my book, right? Not because I didn't write the best book I could. And that. It's like if I'm going to fail, it's because it just didn't work, not because I didn't write as quickly as I could and publish as quickly as I could. And that's kind of been my attitude. And so that kind of does drive the idea of every time you're not writing, you're not doing yourself justice. And it's taken me a while to kind of go, yeah, but you also have to live your own life. Even if it's still from a selfish writing perspective, you won't have the mental health to finish a book if you don't do the things you love. Because writing is the thing you love, but when you try to make anything a profession, it's easy to lose the love of it in place of the want of it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. You want it so bad you don't love it anymore. It's like it's just a need. And I think that's kind of the worry. And so for me it was, I'm writing this novella slower than I wrote the last one, but I'm enjoying it a lot. And I'm in my world, and when I'm writing, I like what I'm doing. I might not like the writing, it's probably shit, but it's kind of slowly a little bit back to the love that I had when I was writing not professionally. I think that helps a lot. It helps with so much stuff, but it's yeah, it's a driver, but it you need to be careful of it.
One of the things in your preface that I've had this conversation with a couple other authors, it's a real breakthrough moment, was seeing your book on a physical, I can touch it, physical book on a bookshelf. What was that like?
It's weird. It's really weird, and I think because I've had a few multiple stages of this. So like at the start, I was seeing it on people who bought my book, and I can't explain how weird it was when I started. When I started, I decided when I made my hardbacks that I would do 50 numbered copies. All right. So I'd get the number printed directly into them of 50, and then I'd have like, number one, number two, number three, just 50. I hadn't launched. So they were all bought by complete strangers, but they supported me and they bought it. And that was crazy. And so many of those have stuck through the whole way through everything now. Before they'd even read the book, I've stuck the whole way through to like this, coming up to the sixth book in the series now. And that was amazing. And like I'll see stuff on the shelves, and then as it was going, it took a while as stuff was selling, and because a lot of people read the ebook and then would decide they wanted to purchase the physical copy. So then after a while, I was starting seeing it popping up on shelves on Instagram and stuff like that. And that was one started the face going, Jesus, that's on someone's bookshelf. And it was just weird. And over the last year and a half, it's gotten more so where I have family and friends and stuff, and I'll be over in their house and my book is just there in their house. And that's weird, like really weird. And like I'll have my best friend that lives with me, like his family, his brother is also one of my closest friends. He called me maybe a week ago just to say, oh, by the way, I finished the third book. And I felt like I wanted to call you just to tell you how really, really fantastic it was. And he's the kind of person that there's no fucking way he would have called me if he didn't enjoy that book. Like no way. Like we'd never have spoken about it again. And that kind of stuff is really nice. And then more recently, being an indie author, it's a lot tougher to get put into bookstores. A lot tougher. For many reasons. Not just because you're indie, but because a lot of bookstores won't take books unless you have returns checked on in your with your distributor. The problem with returns is they could buy 100 books off you, and 3 months down the line they could say, "Nah, we only sold one, so we're going to give you back the other 99." But then you have to pay the shipping for the 99 back. So one, you have to refund them all the money, so now you're back to net zero, and then you have to pay the shipping. So now you've lost whatever it is. And for some people as well, it's hard because, well, for everyone, say they paid you $1,000 for your books. You got paid. You sold books. Great. So now you use that $1,000 to do something. Then they decide to return them. Now you have to give them $1,000 you don't have, plus the $200 for shipping. So now you're 1,200 down. So most indies just turn it off. And I turn it off as well because physical sales weren't big enough for me to justify it at the time. And also, when you set those discounts, stores like Amazon get that same discount. So I have to give them discounts too. So you'll have to set a wholesaler discount. So it's usually between 30 and 55% of the overall cost. They'll get that discount. Okay. So the higher that is, obviously, the less money you get because it means they make more money on their end because they're getting the book cheaper, and then whatever gap between what they bought it and the recommended retail price they get. But whatever you set that at, Amazon gets too. So say I might get 100 physical sales to Amazon, I get one through an indie bookshop. I change that price for the indie bookshop, I now lose all that money on my Amazon sales. So it's a tough one. But recently I've gotten messages. I just sent like an envelope full of book plates over to, which is crazy for me, over to a bookstore in LA who are stocking my book and who have had a book club with the book, and people were loving it. So it's on shelves in a bookstore in LA. But when I went to Ireland, I had a book club over there. They were ordering like 50 hardbacks, all right, and they wanted me to sign them. I couldn't get a bookshop in Ireland to order in 50 books that were already purchased just for me to sign in the shop. So I was like, here's 50 sales, here's free money. And they wouldn't order it in. Whereas there's some bookshops in the UK who have it, and there's some bookshops in the US who have it, like on the shelves. There's a Barnes and Noble in Washington that have it on the shelves. There's one in LA that has it on the shelves. And what was really funny for me was the likes of Barnes and Noble, Waterstones. You can buy my books on those shops online at any point, right? Not a single bookstore in all of Ireland even stocks them online. And it's such a weird thing. It's a weird like Irish thing. It's so strange. Like your home country does not give a shit, but then like in in the UK and the US and like Australia and New Zealand, it's selling really well. There's people who put them on bookshelves and it's not a problem. That's a very Irish attitude. It's a very Irish attitude in that like my home country just are constantly give me that slap being like, you're not that big. You're not that big, dickhead.
They're trying to keep you humble, but yeah,
Yeah.
don't forget, you two are human.
Yeah, you might think you're good, but we think you're shit. it's, that's yeah, that keeps you in check.
Ryan, I really enjoyed the story front to back. It's it's awesome to hear how, even though you push yourself to a limit that I've done something similar and it was not healthy, you came out the other side realizing that there was a way to do that in a way that's more kind to your mind, we could say.
Yep.
You've been through a lot. Also, the career transition, and then being able to say to yourself, "Yeah, I'm an author," and people have tattoos of your stuff, and in that language you made up. It's great to hear. So, compared to that old world you started out in, how are you different today? Not just as a writer, but as a just as a human being. How have you changed over time?
We'll start from a writer perspective. Like I know now on this other side of it, I have a far better framework for my work, for the time that I need to put in, for the time I need to spend writing. I still fuck it up a lot, but like I'll have my spreadsheet done. It's not like a spreadsheet. It's just I use on Excel, and I'll have all my times for my writing where I'll have my blocks, my 4 blocks. I just plug in the time that I start, and it tells me all of my times for breaks and everything else. And I have that set up, and it just helps me work a lot better. I know that from a writer perspective, I've learned so much craft wise from then to now. I'm so much more confident in my writing. And one thing is like that I've really learned is that your biggest obstacle to finishing a draft is and always will be and only is you. And for a lot of people it's constantly revising as they're writing, constantly going back, constantly changing, never moving forward. And I think the biggest realization for me that allowed me to write faster was that like it's okay for the first thing you write to be shit. And the chances are,
It will be shit.
actually, I was almost going to say the opposite. So when you're
No.
doing your first book, yeah, when you're doing, a lot of the time you will. It depends the type of writer you are. So I'm an underwriter, so I'll almost always add word count when I edit. Whereas some people they write really fast. So some I know a friend who might write 10,000 words a day,
Hmm.
but they might only write 1 to 2 days a week. Whereas I cannot hit 10,000 words in a day. I can't do it. When I write, I don't edit a lot, but I can be a bit slower to write. My typing speed is pretty fast, but I take a lot more time in deciding what I'm going to write and how I'm going to write it and where it's going to go. And so when I go to do my second draft, I'm not usually changing a lot. Like I've never deleted a scene, never deleted a chapter, but I'm slower to get the words onto the page. It's just the consistency is what's helped it actually get published, is because I'm slower to get the words onto the page, but I do it more consistently. And it's that sometimes we change stuff because the immediacy of our brain tells us it's shit. And if we leave it and move forward, as long as we understand the direction of where the scene's going and we have a plan for the scene, when we come back the next day, it might be shit, but you'll be pretty surprised the amount of stuff that's pretty good that you would have deleted yesterday. And I think it's the ability to allow yourself to be shit. Just it's okay. If it's shit, it's shit. No one's going to see it.
Hmm.
So just let yourself write it and finish the book, because it doesn't matter how much you edit. If you don't finish the book, you have no book. That was a big thing that I learned from a writing perspective. And I think, I don't know, like as a person, it's so strange because it's hard to pin stuff down because over this last period of time, over this last like 2 years since I've launched, which is what month is it now? Fuck my life. It's April. So I'm just over 2 years since I released my first book. And so much has changed. So like in that time, I quit my job, changed career, got engaged, moved country, moved continent. I'm in New Zealand in a house in essentially for me the middle of nowhere. Like my whole life has changed. So much has been different. I think what I've learned most actually isn't from writing. It's probably from the friends that I've made along the friends we've made along the way. But
Okay.
the friends that I have made, because I think they've taught me a lot, because I've met a lot of people. And even when I went to the convention, my first convention, FantasyCon in London last year, I met a lot of them in person. I think stuff that I probably knew already, but I've kind of taken more to heart, is that understanding how easy it is just to be kind to someone. And it's weird to say that that sort of stuff, it really was taught to me by books and the people that I've met. Like I always know, be nice to people, but it's more when you meet people who are, I think creative people are far more expressive with, say, creative people. When I say that, that sounds like derogatory to people who don't write, but when creative expression is such a core part of who they are, they're far more expressive about their emotions. Some people are, some people aren't, but I think like from what I've met, they are. And I've realized how easy it is to destroy people's. Even for myself, I've realized how easy it is to destroy people's confidence, because my confidence has been destroyed. And from talking to some of the people that like I didn't know before I was writing, and when I have conversations with them, just the way they've talked to me and the things they've said to me has made me really understand like how easy it is. You're taught. I don't know what you guys were taught when you were younger, but we were taught this, the adage, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you.
Sure.
And like it's so so wholly flawed. And I really learned that. You can see, mostly because I see how cut and damaged people were by some of the stuff that other people had said, and I was like, "Fuck, you know what? In the wrong time, I probably would have said something like that, not even thinking." So I think, strangely, something that I never thought would have changed in me over this period of time has changed. I think I've become a little bit more sensitive to the way I phrase things and the way I talk to different people, because I am like a quite naturally like, kind of quite a loud, quite an outgoing person, and I've been a lot more conscious, like when I go on podcasts with groups and stuff, that to tone myself back, not because I think I should be less, but because I know naturally I like just talk over people because I get so excited with stuff, and it's just a thing that I've just become far more conscious of, and especially like with stuff like the loud white guy on podcasts, right? And I'll have authors who are there who are who are women or who are different ethnicities or different everything. I think for better, not for worse, I'm far more conscious when I'm on the podcasts of how much time I take up, like how much I'll be talking, and because I talk a lot and I talk loud, and it's something that I suppose I see more of in the writing community when people are more conscious and about about airtime and privilege and loads of different pieces. And there's some things I agree with, some things I don't. But when it comes to like a podcast and stuff like that, and it's directly my choice, and it's a direct cause impact relationship. My brain didn't function there, but that's fine. It doesn't function very often. But that is something that's been massive for me that I think I shifted a lot, and I didn't really think I had until you asked me this question. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, that has shifted. I think I am quite conscious when it comes to stuff like that, not to be this loud, obnoxious guy, because being loud is who I am, but I don't have to be obnoxious.
Mhm.
It's kind of comes part and parcel with it sometimes when you're getting excited about stuff. So it's something I've become more conscious of as a person, which I think is a very good thing.
People can't see it, but I'm nodding my head a lot. Yeah, one of the things I just had a 40th birthday, and a friend asked me, "What's something you've learned in the last year?" And yeah, I've been doing the podcast for a couple months now, and I thought I've learned the value of just shutting the hell up.
Yep.
Because, like you, when I've done panels and even when I host panels, I'm talking too much. And one of the mission statements, just the personal mission statement for the pod, was just being more humble. It's my sign off too, is just as a reminder to myself, because I'm like you, I have a lot to say. I hope it's interesting to other people, and I can be pretty loud too, and obnoxious as well. I mean, that's one thing I've had to really curb. I used to get in trouble with all the jobs I had for things I said, just because my governor just didn't work all that well. So yeah, I can really relate to what you're saying, man. I think it's just there is a silence can be immensely valuable in teaching you about yourself. Like, there have been numerous times throughout this conversation where I've just told myself, Sam, shut the fuck up, just let Ryan talk.
But it's hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
It is hard not to, because I think a lot of the time, obviously not all the time, depends on the person, but I know for me, a lot of the time, it comes from enthusiasm for what someone else has said.
Exactly.
You're trying to be, I know for me, I'm trying to be enthusiastic about what someone else has said, but sometimes your enthusiasm overpowers what they're saying. And it's a lesson that I do honestly think I've only really started to learn since I've become an author, and since I've gone on panels and podcasts, and since I've talked to people who are on the other side of it. Not fortunately not the other side of it from me, because I would have felt very, very sad about that. And I'd never want someone to feel like that. But who have been in a position where they haven't been listened to, or I don't know. I've met some friends as well who I've seen on podcasts, and I've seen them be quite quiet, even though I know they have a lot to say. And then as I watch the podcast or the video on YouTube, I realize that it's because they're not being given a chance to say something. So I think that's made me more sensitive to it. I'm still loud, and it's who I am. Like I'm enthusiastic about stuff. So I don't always succeed, but it is something that I try and pull back on, because I understand that my enthusiasm is there. It's coming from a good place, but it just doesn't always work that way. The desired result isn't always there.
And it's always up to interpretation with the folks you're
Yep.
talking to. A lot of people are pretty understanding. Some people just misinterpret stuff. Your enthusiasm can be interpreted as kind of lording what they may think is you being all knowing, omniscient over them. And
Oh yeah.
ego always comes into play.
I think even from a perspective, I think that's one thing, but even from the perspective of whether they think I've done something or not, I think I'm just aware that outside of someone's opinion on it, I've just taken a bit of time away from these people, whoever's beside me, like my other panelists, and that maybe I didn't need to take. maybe it was their time to just talk about stuff. And just from a personal thing, I'm like, it's a bit shit of me.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't want to be that dickhead. So yeah, look, I'll always fail every now and again because it's who I am. I'm like, I'm loud, partially because I was born basically deaf in one ear, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse. Just a little excuse. But also, just it's just who I am. I get enthusiastic about stuff, and I don't want to get rid of that part of me. I just want to know when to rein it in. The only thing I could say when it comes to only other thing I could say when it comes to this whole new world and where I am now versus where I was is understanding for me is a note that I would say is that no matter how much more confident I am in my writing, I still doubt myself all the time, like all the time, and it's totally normal to doubt myself. I need to kind of just get that. And the one thing, like we talked about at the very start, when I was saying how I wasn't unfulfilled in my job before, and so I wasn't like desperately searching for something. But now that I'm here, I just realize how fulfilled I am, and I think for the first time for me, everyone's always obsessed with knowing who they are and where they're going and what they're doing, and the reality is 99% of people don't have a fucking clue until they get there.
Yeah.
And everyone acts like they do. No, not everyone acts like they do. Everyone tries to act like they do. And some people act like it way more. And other people are more open with saying they don't know where they are. And it's okay to not know where you are. Like I spent 7 years, I was 28. It's really hard for me to even contemplate because COVID like just blurred these years at the end.
Yeah.
But like 28 ish, when I switched careers from being a biochemist to being an author. That's a fucking weird switch. It's not common. It's a slight bit of a U turn. So I think it's fair to say I didn't have a clue where I was going or what I was doing, and that's normal. And if I think with writing for the first time for me now, I go, man, I really fucking love this. This is great, and I'm still stressed like you wouldn't believe. I am more stressed now than I've ever been in my entire life because even though stuff's selling, and even though I really love what I'm doing, writing is now the sole thing that pays my half of the mortgage. It is the sole thing that puts food on the table for me, and I think that's something that I would kind of say back to people as well, which we'll probably come to at the end, but it's just understand what you're asking for, understand what you're chasing, because it is not just this golden scenario. You can make a great living off writing, and you might still be miserable because you might have taken away the love for what you're doing. And I think I learned it. I went full time with music for a year. When I was, I can't remember what age I was, probably like 24, 25. When I came back from South America, I was probably like 24 or 25. And I fucking hated it. I was earning enough. I love music. And I played for a long time and I was earning good money. And I hated it because all my personal worth hung on the one thing that I loved. And I think people always chase it because we are in a society where we were taught to monetize everything we love. And it's hard when you finally do monetize it fully and you go, I don't love this anymore. And now I'm sad because the one hobby, the one thing that brought me joy is gone. So that is something to be aware of because I'm one of the few I think who have a sample of two different dreams. And I got to one and now I wasn't touring concerts all across the world, but I was earning a full-time living playing music and I fucking despised it once I got there. And then I did it with writing and I love it, but I'm still stressed like crazy. And it's just part of what I'm doing. And I know stress drives me sometimes. So like when I get stressed, when I get in a stressful situation, and the biggest example is I wrote something like 180,000 words in 50 days
Jesus.
to finish off my third. But I actually have a record. So I have an app called Write-O-Meter, and I log my words in every day. So I have a full record of exactly what it was. So it was like 181,000 words in 50 days towards the end of December, just there. End of December 2022. So it was like November going into December to finish off my third book, which is 437,000 words long.
Wow.
That was stress because I had a deadline. I had a pre order and it was just crazy. So I was writing fucking crazy hours, crazy amounts. And I've never been so stressed, but I still love it. So it just depends. Understanding what you're asking for is really important.
Advice. A couple of these I was looking at, I've also checked out. So, Ryan, why don't you give us some advice for aspiring writers?
Yeah, so I think there's loads of different pieces of advice, loads of different areas of advice. The first piece of advice that I was always give is don't listen to all the advice you get given. I think the the key thing is understanding what works for you and understanding that your path will never be the same as someone else's path and you can't copy it directly. So with that, some of the stuff that it's not to do with path, like for me, from a craft perspective and from a publishing perspective, there's stuff like I would advise anyone who's a new writer to, and even if you're not a new writer, to go and watch all of Brandon Sanderson's YouTube videos from, I think it's from BU, it's Brigham.
BYU, Brigham Young University.
That's it, yeah. So he's put it in his entire a year worth of his like lectures online on YouTube for free with guests like Mary Robinette Cole come on. And whether you like Brandon Sanderson, whether you like anything to do with them, it does not matter. They are fantastic from a craft perspective. The way he breaks down character into three different like toggles that you can turn for proactivity, likability, and proficiency or competency, I think is what he calls it. Those three toggles for proactivity, competency, and likability, the way he applied them makes it so easy for me, I know, for me to solve issues that I have with characters. So I'll go and I will pick things in particular. So I had a character who I wanted to have a slow burn in certain areas. So I took away his proactivity because he was being dragged through the story, but he was quite likable and he was pretty competent at what he was doing. And then I would take another character, I would take their likability down, but I would make them really proactive and really good. So I have an evil character. He's not evil, all right, but just easier way. He's like one of the antagonists, at least for the first book, and he's become one of the absolute series favorites. And he is a fucking despicable guy. But the way it's done for me is that the things he does, he also does a lot of honorable stuff. And even when he's doing the despicable stuff, there's reasons, but he's not likable. But he's really fucking good at what he does. And he's really, really proactive in pushing the story forward. And when you watch Brandon Sanderson's courses and stuff, you go, I know why now. I know why this works. And when you know why, you know how to change it. I think it's a free resource and it's amazing. And on that as well, he has a podcast called the Writing Excuses Podcast with him, Dan Wells, Mary Robin Cole's on it now. And there's also Howard Stern. No, it's not. It's not Howard
It's
Stern.
not
It's not
Howard,
Howard
no, it's
Stern.
definitely not Howard Stern.
It's not
I know
Howard
you're
Stern.
talking about though. Yeah.
Yeah, he does all the comics. He does Sock Mercenary, but it's also fantastic. And they're only 15 minutes long each episode. Really, really good for craft. I think for me, when it got towards the latter seasons, I wasn't as interested, but it's like 14 seasons of it, so there's a lot of content. And then from a business and publishing perspective, I listened to Mark Dawson's self-publishing formula podcast like back to back all the time. I listened to Summer Joanna Penn's one, and then she started going down all these avenues and AI writing, and it's just stuff that just does not interest me at all. So I've just left it.
Yeah, the AI stuff is. I have a lot of thoughts on AI and
Yeah,
its implementation in literature.
yeah, that's a whole different podcast on its own.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think, like I said, the Six Figure Authors podcast with Lindsay Baroker was a massive one for me too. Listen to that all the time. Um, I'm saying a lot, but that's cool because I'm considering it part of who I am. And then outside of that, I think David Cochran, who is Irish, he has loads of books. Let's Get Digital, Amazon Decoded, BookBub Ads Decoded, and he also has a little free course. His books are fantastic, like genuinely fantastic, brilliant. If you're even looking on how to get a mailing list going, how to get a website going, what resources are the best, what resources are the cheapest, what resources are the best compromise between cheapest and high performing, he has all of it in there. It's brilliant, and he breaks it down with a lot of wit and humor, and it's quite fun to read. It's like the only nonfiction I've actually read, and I devoured it. Like sat down on the couch and just read through it, laughing at some of the stuff he was saying. Really, really, really good resource. I would tell anyone to read them. And then also Robert Ryan, if you have a bit more of an analytical side to your brain, Robert Ryan's books are for, I think it's Amazon Unleashed, and he has them for the other, it's for ads. He has them for the ads platforms for Amazon and Facebook and stuff. They are truly top notch. Like, take the time to read them. The other piece of advice I would give: we spend our whole lives always looking for silver bullets to everything, always wanting stuff to be like this one answer thing, and it's not. The reality is, grind for everything is going to be your first one. But outside of grind, which is just an objective, broad stroke piece of advice that I said earlier isn't applicable because it's hard to use. You need to grind, but stuff like this, educate yourself. David Cochran's books, right? Robert Ryan's books, any podcasts like that, like listen to them. You're not going to find a silver bullet. do not message authors and say, hey, what's the one thing you think has done well for you? Because you're not going to get a response because there is no one thing. It's an accumulation of all these different things. It's an amalgamation of so much different research and hard work. And then outside of that, essential habits. I think habits are kind of a core thing for an author. Like they really, really, really are. And what I was saying to you earlier is the number one, the absolute number one is just be okay with being shit. Don't be scared to be shit. Let yourself be shit. Get the words on the page and then clean them up. I think it was Neil Gaiman. Everyone gives this piece of advice that Neil Gaiman tweeted ages ago. It was basically saying, the first draft is just getting the story down, and the second draft is for making it look like you knew what you were doing all along. If you don't finish the book, you can't edit the book. If you can't edit the book, you can't publish the book. All right. And another one for me is people always talk about luck. I think I've been called lucky a lot, and I damn well am lucky. But I think the thing for me is you can be lucky all you want. But if you haven't put the hard work in, you're going to get a lucky moment and it's just going to pass you by. If you're not ready to take advantage of the luck when it comes, there's no point in being lucky. Some people use it as an excuse as to why they haven't succeeded. Some people use it as an excuse as to why other people have succeeded. There are plenty of authors out there who are amazing and fantastic and just have not gotten the luck, and that is true. But then there's plenty out there who have gotten the luck and haven't put the work in, and you don't know who they are because they never made it. The reality is, no matter what, is you can't control your luck, but the one thing you can control is how much hard work you put in and how much you write. It's a common thing where people will say, "Oh, hard work isn't the determining factor for success as an author. It's all about luck." It's like, no, it absolutely fucking isn't. It is about hard work. It's about putting the time in and then hoping luck comes along.
Yeah.
Control what you can control. I suppose is the general piece of advice there. Spend your time controlling what you can control instead of moaning about what you can't control. That's not me being harsh with someone else. I have done it before, and it's me being harsh with me. I'm just doing it out loud.
I've always heard that luck is I like this one, that luck is the intersection of hard work and opportunity. You can kind of make your own luck in a sense.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was Tiger Woods. I love doing all these quotes. Pretty sure it was Tiger Woods when he was saying, "Oh, I've been called lucky." Yeah, I'm lucky. It's funny. The harder I work, the luckier I get. You just got to be ready, basically. If luck comes along, got to be ready. It might not come along, but if you're not ready, there was no point in it coming along in the first place. I had a talk with another author I know quite well, a friend of mine, Philip Quintrell. And Phil's just a really, really nice guy and loads of books out there. We had talked about it a while ago, and we were basically saying how what a lot of people just don't seem to get this hard work thing again. People like to say that hard work isn't the determining factor, but it really is. You got to be willing to sacrifice to do stuff like this. You really do. You have to put in those crazy hour days where you might not see people, you might not do this. You have to be willing to take risks that you just wouldn't normally take in real life. And I think it's kind of the thing with chasing any dream. It requires sacrifice.
And it's scary.
Yeah, you have to be willing to push yourself there. And that's one of the smaller parts. It's just you need to be willing to go there. And on that same note, another piece of advice I always use that's amazing for me and I think is important for anyone pursuing anything is to know precisely what your goals are. Because people talk about success, but success is only measured against goals. I always set small, achievable goals and then big dream goals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't mean like sitting down like with like, scented candles and a Himalayan salt lamp and like, manifesting your dreams. I mean like sitting down and going, what do I want from this? Like, what do I want? Become a world famous author is not an achievable goal because you don't determine the parts of that. So for me, it's like sitting going, I want to finish this book, right? And then I didn't set a number of copies I wanted to sell. I was like, I want to sell more copies next month than I did this month. And that's it. Whether it was 2 against 1 or 200 against 100, I just want to sell more. Set those goals. Understand what's going on. I feel like I'm on a bro podcast. I'm like, set those goals, man. And which isn't what I mean at all. It's just knowing what you want from something. Mm-hmm. Because you don't know if you've gotten it if you don't know what you wanted.
Well, I think what you're getting to is the core of it is what's your sphere of influence? A lot of people think their sphere of influence is the entire publishing world, whereas realistically, it barely extends past your person.
Yep.
It's like going to the gym. I want to do 6 push-ups instead of 5 yesterday and just ratchet that up in realistic ways.
That's it. But from a basic thing, I'm going to publish this book. There's nothing stopping you but you. There is nothing in your way stopping you from doing that. I'm going to put in as much time as I want to research. Basically, it's take the goals you want and then find out and list the ways that you can influence that goal. It was a big thing for me, and I think it's really important to understand. Set your goals, understand what you're trying to achieve. And then also what was really important for me is finding
finding a way to write, finding what way works for me. Some people talk about, everyone talks about pantsing and plotting, and it's like that is not how that works. Like everything else in life, it's a spectrum. And I always make the joke that pantsers are just really, really fucking extreme plotters. They're so more hardcore than plotters because you have just plotted an entire fucking draft. That's a plotter. So you're actually the same thing. You just approach them slightly differently.
I was just thinking about that last night where, like, if you say you're a plotter, okay, well, you're coming up with a plot on the spot. That's pantsing. Okay, if you say you're a pantser, well, you're coming up with material on the spot. That's outlining. You're just a hybrid. That's what we are. Is we're all hybrids, and like you say, it's on a spectrum.
That's it. It's a spectrum of on what way you build your. Instead of looking at outlining and planting and plotting, you're building a skeleton for what you're doing, and it's just how you build that skeleton. Is that skeleton bullet points? Is that skeleton beat sheets? Is that skeleton a fully fleshed out draft that is going to be completely slaughtered when you go back to it? Like just because you wanted to know where you were going. I think it's just understanding what works for you. Like I know for me that I ended up writing so much more when I sat down and when I went to a scene. This is my scene. I always do a few things before I write the scene now. I didn't do this when I started. I go, who is the main point of view? What do they want from the scene? What is the main obstacle to them getting what they want? And what is the tone of the scene? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it angry? Because that influences the narrative that I write, that the way I will literally structure the sentences. So for me, that changed everything. And that might not work for some people, but it's just taking the time. Another small piece of advice for me on that same vein is what I said earlier. Everyone will always tell you what did not work for them. Do not listen to people on what doesn't work for them, especially if they've been around a while and there's just loads of stuff that isn't working. Everything that I have that's worked amazingly for me is stuff that I was sworn is trash.
Hmm.
So, newsletter and website, I was told they're a waste of time, pointless. Nobody uses it. I now have over, like I said, over 7,000 people on my newsletter. My open rate is like 65, 64%, I think, which is massive for that. I get about, I think I'm closing in on 100,000 visits to my website just this year now. I use it to host my map. I use it to host the glossaries for all my books. I use like loads of little bits, my book progress updates for my readers. It's all stuff I was told didn't work. And I was told Twitter is trash. Twitter has been my absolute best social media by 100 miles. There's no comparison. But there's people that doesn't work for. And it's understanding that stuff doesn't just work. You need to learn why it works. Everything. Amazon ads, they're trash. They don't work. They're the only ads I use. And it's just that people will tell you what doesn't work for them. But by the same principle that your path is not going to be the same as them and what worked for them might not always work for you, it works inversely too.
Yeah, I've had previous guests on who say the things that you've said don't work for them. It really is just like find out what your thing is, and it's fine to cherry pick from people who are successful in that regard and find out how to weaponize it.
At the core of everything, comprehension is there. So that people say, Twitter doesn't work. I don't get interaction on Twitter. I'm like, that is because you follow 11,000 people and 11,000 people follow you. And you only followed them because you were following back. They don't give a shit about your content. They don't care. They only followed you because you followed them, and the same way around. And all that leads to is this weird little Twitter circle jerk where nobody actually cares.
It can be very incestuous on Twitter.
But it's not even the problem with that. It's simply for the fact that you have 11,000 followers and everything is based off algorithms. People talk about algorithms as though they're magic. They're not. They're based off logic. They're logic engines. So if you're on Twitter and I'm running an algorithm for Twitter, I am going to base how good your content is based on percentage interaction of followers. All right, what's your engagement rate? If I have 10 followers and 10 people like every tweet, my engagement rate's 100%. Okay, so they know my content's good, but my following is low. If I have 11,000 followers and 10 people like my tweet, my engagement rate is 0.00. Like you are, I'm not going to hit the exact number because someone's going to correct my maths, but it is astronomically low. So that is the algorithm saying their content is not engaging and potentially bordering spam.
Hmm.
That's the difference. And it's understanding that. So there's people just trying to build followers to reach an arbitrary number, which doesn't actually feed content for Twitter. And it's the same with like Amazon ads. There's algorithms and people say they're magic, and it's not magic. Like the biggest one they're going to use is conversion rate. Like anything, Amazon is the biggest, most advanced storefront in the entire world. What they're going to, their key metric is going to be If 100 people land on your page, how many buy your book? So if you funnel thousands and thousands of people to your page who don't like, for me, who don't like epic fantasy with dragons, my conversion rate is going to be tiny. They're going to stop sending people there. Whereas if I send 1,000 people to my page and I really laser focus in on who I'm getting, and 900 of those 1,000 people buy that book, Amazon will send free traffic to my page. That's what algorithm love is, right? For anyone who's not there, I'm doing air quotes because people think it's magic and it's luck, but it's not magic and it's not luck. It's research and it's comprehension because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to drive an algorithm. So you've got to find what drives the algorithm. What drives the algorithm, even if you don't know, even if you can't see Amazon's code, use a little bit of logic here. What would Amazon pick as their key metric? It has to be sales. And then you can't use sales to drive an algorithm. So you go, is it actually conversion? How many people, what is the percentage chance of this converting to a sale? Amazon will always pick the one that gives them more money. It's just the way it works. So if 50% of the people on my page buy my book and 20% people on your page buy your book, they're going to give me more organic traffic because they'll make more money. So even just from logic, that makes sense. There's no reason why they wouldn't do that. And they're hiring the greatest minds I can imagine, the greatest minds they could possibly find to develop these algorithms. So I get a feeling those greatest minds would have come up with the same idea. Yeah, so on different pieces of advice, one of the key ones, you can't stay stable in anything without understanding your mental health and kind of keep your mental health in a good place. And we've talked about it earlier, bringing it up about saying how if you're not looking after yourself, you're not going to be able to get your writing done, not going to get anything done. So for me, what I ended up doing, and I think it was actually my partner Amy, she'd like almost kick me when I'm in the chair and be like, get the fuck, go and do something because you're going to be a miserable bastard later on. That's how we function. Tender abuse. Yeah, like for me, it was going for walks, going to the gym. It's different things for different people, but just getting up and out of the chair. And I actually, that's what the Pomodoro method did a lot for me because I got up and out of the chair. I did a half an hour. I stood up for 20 minutes. I'd go and do something. Sometimes I just read a book, but it forced me to take headspace away from writing, which I think was massive. And then also like kind of learning what writing space works. So some people like noisy cafes, some people like it really quiet, some people have there's so many different ways you can write. And I've slowly had to learn what I find the most productive. Like I know that I can write with headphones on the couch when people are watching TV because I started doing that because I was spending so much time alone writing. I was like, well, I should at least be physically present with people. So I'd go out, but it wasn't as productive, but I was balancing it. I needed to spend time with people. So I would do that. Whereas I found my most productive for me is in a quiet space. And usually I'll put on like music that's to do with the theme of what I'm writing. So like if I'm currently writing this kind of icy wasteland, so I'm quite literally listening to like icy wasteland, dark fortress, ambient music.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for some people. It does to me. But I think that's a big thing is kind of learning what works for you, both from a writing perspective and then also from a mental health perspective and trying to keep yourself in a good place, which is so much easier said than done, as I think pretty much everybody knows. You asked me before about like mindfulness habits and stuff. I cannot find any. I haven't been able to work out any kind of meditation or like super habits that work for me. And the only one that I've said to you already is just that let yourself be shit. It's the only thing that worked for me. It's the bigger thing. Instead of sitting down and trying to zen myself, I'm just like, look, it's okay. It's gonna be all right. Like I can come back. The great thing about the book that isn't released yet is that it's not released yet. You can twist it and change it as much as you want.
Yeah, well, that's just equanimity, being good with the way things are in that moment. I mean, it is pretty zen, though. I mean, the idea of just it is what it is, and your ability to actually control the situation is, like we talked about, sphere of influence is pretty minimal. So, yeah, the first draft's going to be shit. If it is, the nice thing is nobody's going to miss the things they never knew you wrote. So if you've got to kill darlings, then you kill them. The only person lamenting over them is you.
Yeah, I think it can be one of the biggest detriments on writers' mental health is that kind of idea that they can't get what they're doing finished because it's so shit and it's all shit and I can't write it and it's crap and you go, yeah, okay, and move on. If the core of your story is there, move on. And then when you're coming back, you can do it later. And it can really help with that, for me anyway, it helped with that idea that I wasn't producing fast enough because I was allowing myself to write, which is the key thing.
I'm stuck in that trap periodically. I write I like big books and I cannot lie. And it takes way longer than it should because I'm a perfectionist and perfect is the enemy of done. So, talking to you, man, it really does help kind of recontextualize things and help me kind of come to grips with speed and perfectionism. Where's the balance there? Because I would like to self publish as well, but right now I'm not in the right space for it.
It's one of those where like I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD. My mom works with second chance education and a lot of people who would have ADHD and a lot of other kind of different neuroatypical instances. And she always jokes, she's like, we really should have just gotten you tested. It's stuff that's like clinical stuff. Like for instance, like I could have 3 cans of Monster Energy and just go to sleep.
Good Lord.
So caffeine does not have any upward effect on me. It actually tends to make me quite sleepy, and I get serious phases of hyperfixation. And it's really, really hard for me to steer away from something that I find. When I say hard, like it's near impossible, and it's taken quite a lot to even try and push through anything. And I actually found it just as a slight segue, which I thought was hilarious. I don't know if you ever watched Malcolm in the Middle.
I never watched it. I totally missed that. I feel like that was a whole event that I'm totally out of the know on.
There's an episode with Hal, who's the dad, Bryan Cranston, and I saw this recently, and it was like the best depiction of ADHD in modern fiction. I'm gonna miss parts of it, right? But he walks into the house, and he switches the light switch, right, and the bulb doesn't go on. He's got shit. He goes opens a drawer to get the light bulb, but then there's no light bulb. But when he opens it, the drawer squeaks. He's like, oh fuck, okay. And he goes out to the garage and he goes to get a can of WD-40, and he brings it back and he goes to use it on the drawer, but then there's none left. So he grabs his car keys and he gets in the car. He's only after coming home. And he's getting in the car to drive out to the shop to buy WD-40 to fix the drawer, to get the light bulb, to put in the light. All right? He tries it and the car doesn't start. And it flashes forward like 4 hours later. And his wife comes into the house and flicks the light switch. And it goes back outside and you're in the driveway and you just see the car. And you can hear her voice. She's like, Hal, fix the light switch. And then he wheels out covered in grease from underneath the car with like wrenches in his hand, like clearly trying to fix something through the engine. He's like, can't you see that's what I'm doing? And it's just absolutely amazing. That's it. That's a little segue that for me just brought me so much joy because it's literally how my day works. I've come in to write something and I'm trying to write, and that's what ends up happening sometimes when I sit there and I want to move forward and I know there's a problem. But then what happens is I can't push myself forward because I'm fixated on the problem. So then my brain finds another fixation and I'll like turn around and I'll see an empty space of wall and I'll realize that I have a picture downstairs that I'd love to hang, but I don't have a frame. So then I'll go to the shop and I'll get a frame and I'll put the picture in the frame. And then I realize I don't want it to hang it with. So I get back in the car and I go somewhere else and that shop doesn't have it. And then somehow I come home with like 2 new t-shirts, like an apple, and it's like 4.5 hours later, I finally hung up that frame, but I still haven't written. And it's like someone said a while ago how sometimes writing is spending like 8 hours not writing. And I had a lot of other authors being like, this is absolute bullshit. Like, how can someone spend 8 hours and not do that? That's not possible. And I'm sitting here being like, I do that every fucking day. Like, part of my writing process is spending 4 hours being distracted.
Mhm.
And that's just me. And I don't physically think there's a way to change that because like at my core, it's just what happens. I will 100%, I have legitimately been writing, and at the end of the day, I had a new shelf. But I've gone downstairs, and literally just started making something, and just that's that. I got distracted for 4 or 5 hours just doing woodwork, and then that's it.
That sounds kind of nice. I wouldn't mind doing that, a little carpentry in my life.
Yeah, except when I say you wake up because it's like a fucking trance. You wake up then later on, and you're like, I haven't written anything, and it's 5 o'clock. How is that possible?
See, I do this with research. I'll go down that rabbit hole and I start learning about this. Then it references that. If it's procrastination, it feels like productive procrastination, if that's not oxymoronic enough.
At least you're doing that. I've spent hours on the Song of Ice and Fire wiki pages.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Like I've done it on the Wheel of Time as well, and I'm like just reading random shit. I'm like hours down the line, and I'm like, that's so interesting that that's what the Forsaken did. And I'm like, God damn it, it's been 5 hours.
I'm still just mad that Perrin really never got the treatment he deserved.
No, honestly, it's just not okay.
That's a big disservice in the fantasy world. I think most of us can agree on.
Yep.
You've given a lot of publishing advice, but you've got more, and I want to hear all of it. So, what would you like to share with us in that regard? Because for me, this has been such an education, Ryan. So I'm happy to hear more.
Well, just for anyone listening, I do have like bullet points on this. I'm not just sitting here going bang, 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 bang. And I don't know if that noise will come through as a machine gun or just me spitting into the microphone. But either way,
It can be both.
so yeah, just in case it looks like I'm just racking these things off. So yeah, like one of the biggest ones, a big debate at the minute is between indie and trad, and I don't honestly think there's a between. All right, I think they're two different paths, and there's merit to both of them, and also you can combine them later down the road. Some people do that.
Rage of Dragons. I can't remember the name of the author. He started self-publish, and now he's trad.
Evan Winter, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, but even at that, I think that's another misconception that's a slight tangent off. I think a lot of people go, oh man, I'll self publish until I can get trad. The reality is, I know far more indie self published authors earning full time incomes than trad authors.
Yeah.
So the reality is, I think it's that old mindset, and I'll get into that later, but I don't think that means trad is gone. There's loads of trad authors doing amazingly and loving it. And it's a route that is really good for some people. There's another one, another podcast out now. I think it's called it's called the Publishing Rodeo. And it's Sun Yi Dean. I've probably got the name wrong pronunciation wise, and Scott Drakeford. And it's fantastic. And they're both traditionally published authors, and they're just talking honestly and candidly about their experience. But it's very, very good. They have some great guests on as well. Yeah, I think it's for me, like I never queried. I looked at stuff, I looked at the different way, I looked at the speed of the trad industry, I looked at the level of creative control I'd have, and I said, you know what?
Or the lack thereof.
Yeah, and I said, I don't think I'd function very well in that. And even I just don't think I'd have the patience. At least not right now. I wasn't at the space to do it. I might query some other stuff later on to try and diversify stuff, but I don't know. But I definitely didn't do that at all when I was starting. And I picked my path. And I think it's important to understand that, because people will ask stuff like, what's a word count? What's too much? What's too little? For indie, none. Do what you want. There's different things to take into account when it comes to it, like Kindle Unlimited page reads and loads of different factors. But in general, it's your choice. For trad, it's still your choice. There are bigger books that get taken up and smaller books that get taken up all the time, but they're more anomalous. Whereas most of the different genres will have their general word counts for reasons, like for printing reasons and cost reasons and stuff. It's not set in stone. I know there's different agents and editors who will tell you that they have bought outside of those ranges if the book is very good. But yeah, just understanding the path you're going to go down, and then also understanding that whichever one you choose, the publishing industry is completely changed. It's not what it used to be at all. And it's not the case that if you go trad, you just write every day and don't have to do anything. And because I'm not trying to put on a patronizing voice to say that's what people did, but it's what a lot of people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the truth at all. And even if it was, it is the tiniest bit of control you can have over your own career in trad. Why would you not have it? So like having that ability to steer, to build an audience, to have a mailing list, I still think mailing lists for trad authors are very important because it puts the readers in their hands, not your publisher's hands. I think every piece of power you put in your publisher's hands takes it out of yours. But yeah, you've very little creative control when it comes to trad, and very little control over your own audience, which I have as an indie. But I think mailing lists are just as important for trad authors as they are for indie authors, because they give you that ability to hold your own readers, which otherwise you're depending on trad giving you a big launch the next time. And it's well known that series sales in trad at least go downwards. So you actually will get less money, less launch on your second than your first, and your third than your second. Now, there are logical reasons for that, to do with the fact that indies focus on ebooks, and ebooks have a far higher read through, because if someone buys a first book, they can literally just click and the second one's in their hands. Whereas with trad, because they focus on print, a lot of the time that person needs to wait to go to the bookstore to buy the next book, and they might forget about it for 6 months. So your read through is going to be lower. And it's just one of those things. If trad embraced ebooks, they would see far higher read through in series, far higher reader retention. That's a whole different podcast. Yeah, so it's kind of, I suppose it's understanding that the industry is shifted massively. No matter which way you choose, knowledge is power, and understanding publishing is going to benefit you no matter where you are, no matter which route you've gone down. The more knowledge you have, the more understanding and comprehension you have of what you're doing and the world you're publishing in. No, I'm not going to say the more successful you'll be, but the more opportunity and control you'll give yourself over your own success, which I think is massive. And another thing, let me see, I'm trying to think of little bits that I have, and stuff that I've said already, like blanket advice from people and publishing online is just trash. People will just tweet shit, just give blanket advice for publishing, and it's just completely non applicable. Like exactly what I said earlier is that when someone's given this broad, sweeping critique, it's just so unhelpful because it's so hard to apply it to what you're actually doing. So just try and ignore the trolls. One thing that I used a lot extensively in writing was beta readers, and I would advise almost no one to pay for a developmental editor. That's not nothing against developmental editors. It's just for me, I love copy editors, think they're great. But for me, I think the beta reader is more important because I like the crossover of opinion. I think sometimes with a developmental editor or just a single editor for overall story, what you're essentially getting is one person's critique of a story.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, when I use my beta readers, I started off with 10, I have about 20 now, and I get so much good crossover. So there's times when I'll say stuff that I just don't agree with, and then 15 other people will go, "Yeah, no, something's wrong here," and then I'll definitely take a look at it. For instance, I've had instances where I've had two beta readers who give me completely opposite feedback on certain sections. If one of those was my editor and I had no one else, my story would be very different. I've had one beta reader out of 20 say an entire storyline was just crap, just didn't work for them. And that same storyline was like six of my other beta readers' favorite storylines.
Mm.
So it's getting that diversity of opinion for me was massive. That might not be what works with everyone, but I know for me it was really, really good, and it helped to when my beta readers now are my readers for my books. So I gather them through my mailing list. So I know they're my target audience too. So it really does help. But I think beta readers for me was massive. Having that diversity or that diverse opinion, the crossover of opinion was really, really good. I think when you're working with beta readers, it's understanding which feedback is important though, because getting 10 beta readers who typically read in romantic fantasy to read your epic fantasy, that feedback isn't going to work with you as well. There might be one or two readers who read both. But I mean, if we're taking the extreme here, and you're taking beta readers who aren't in your genre, it's not as good feedback for you. And you also have to understand when you just need to be confident with yourself. Like we were saying earlier, it's that weird crossover of being confident and then also being humble and also being able to be self-critical. Outside of that, I think for the last bit that I would say is just push yourself outside your comfort zone. It's one of those things that really, you hear like 70-year-old kind of like redneck guys just being like, people these days, they have our lives too easy. And obviously they get a bit ridiculous. And then you have other people who aren't willing to allow any discomfort happen to them at all. And I think you need to find that middle area. Nothing great was ever really created sitting inside your comfort zone. And I think pushing yourself that little bit, going to places that maybe you wouldn't go, putting yourself in positions that you wouldn't usually put yourself in, can, for me, it's massive. And I think for a lot of people, if you're always comfortable, you're never really challenging yourself and you're never really getting better at what you're doing. So pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, challenging yourself is incredibly important. And I know for me, the last piece that I put in, like any of my marketing stuff, any of the stuff that I've written, like I wrote a blog for Self Publishing Monthly a while ago, and I've done some little pieces with Library of Viking on YouTube, and I've done stuff with Patrick Leo. And the one piece of advice that I always give, that for me, I don't even think it's advice, it's just like, be nice to people, like be authentic and be understanding, and you'll go so far. Even on like my newsletters and Twitter and stuff, all I try to do is be genuine. Just be who you are. Like when I write my newsletters, I try and put as much of myself into it as I can. I tell all the stupid dad jokes that I would tell, and I do all the stupid shit that I would do. And I get a lot of emails back with people saying, "Oh, you're the only newsletter that I really look forward to reading," and that makes my day. I was like, "This is great." And I think it's really, really understated. People are always trying to learn who they should be to be successful. They're like, what way should I act? What should I be like? What's this person like? They're successful. Will I be like them? And it's like, no, just be genuine, be decent, and talk to people the way you'd want to be talked to. And it's such a small piece of advice that just goes so fucking far.
It's totally true, man. And you know what? This is something I've been kind of wrestling with the podcast is I don't entirely always feel like I'm revealing my entire self. I never lie, but I don't always feel like I'm being entirely myself. So this conversation has been really cathartic in a lot of ways, because I feel like I've been able to articulate a lot of the things that typically I don't, because I've been trying to be other people. So hearing you say that, man, again, it's just it's therapy. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm really. I wasn't laughing at you. I'm laughing at more of a. I totally get that. I get that feeling. I get that. Like, yeah, it's something that's not. It's not so easy to do. Like, because like that you're sitting on a. Even you're doing a podcast like this, and you're talking, and like I said, you're not lying. But I get what you mean. There's pieces of you you're not saying, and you don't always need to be saying those pieces. I find listeners in the same way as readers appreciate seeing the certain pieces of what a person is. So like when you read a book, it's the themes. So like I know in my book, in my books, I have very strong themes of found family, very strong themes in particular of male mental health and of support systems for male mental health, where I have direct comparisons between two characters going through the similar mental struggles, one of them with a strong support network and one of them without them, and seeing the differences. And not only that, the one who has the support network has taken something from the other person inadvertently, as in, like, it's friends that person should have had, but situations have happened and they can't get back to them. And it's the idea of what would have happened if this person didn't leave, if they had stayed, and if that person had the support network that this person had. And I think that kind of stuff for me is, it's like, it's not the listeners, it's readers. They see that, they see what I'm about, they see what I'm trying to do. And then when I'm talking to my podcast as well, I make sure in podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff, I make sure not to avoid that topic, because that's something that's, I feel really strongly about, like male mental health and support networks. And yeah, and I said the reason I say like especially male mental health is just because, in general societies, many societies, men are told to repress their emotions, told not to talk to each other. And it's a funny one, because I've gotten like questions from readers being like, are these characters gay? Because I've never seen men in fantasy fiction show emotion in this way. And I was like, no, these characters, I was like, there are definitely gay characters in these books. These particular characters aren't. This is literally just showing a love between two really deep friends, who are there to support each other. And then I've had plenty of other people who've said it in the same way and going like, it's really nice to see platonic, healthy male friendship. And I think it's something that I've wanted to show in my books for a long time, because I haven't seen a lot of it. It's something that, like, I think I was raised with. My friends are quite, most of them are quite open with their emotions, and if something's wrong, like, we will talk to each other and like we'll call it out. Like if I see a friend and they're struggling, I won't be like, oh, here's a beer. I'll sit them down and be like, is everything okay? What's up? Like, and I don't just say like, what's up? I want the answer. It's not like a hello. It's a, talk to me. So I really wanted to put that into the books. And I think when I do podcasts and YouTube videos and any kind of talks, I'm like, this is something I want to talk about. And I do think that authenticity comes across. And I think it's really important people get to see a piece of who you are.
Absolutely. And I think everybody listening, myself included, definitely got that. I mean, there's such an honesty to yourself, man, that just like with male mental health, which is something I also write about as well, what you said today really resonates, man. And like I mentioned, this has been cathartic, it's been therapeutic, and I really appreciate it, Ryan. So thanks again for sharing your preface with us today.
Thanks for having me on. It's been really good fun. It's not that often you spend 2 hours talking to someone. That's it. It's great. It's fun.
And there you have it, my conversation with Ryan Cahill. Awesome. Like I mentioned at the top, this was a real kick in the nuts for me, but in a good way. I really enjoyed the conversation about imposter syndrome. It was just so relevant, as well as how Ryan just pushes through it and is always challenging himself. That was one of the key takeaways I have. It's just, dude hustles. And he, like he mentions, he understands that this thing is a grind. I think the anecdote about the tattoo was awesome. A lot of authors, I don't want to say all, but a lot of us at least, I think, really look forward to that first moment where somebody say, what you wrote, what you said made a huge difference in my day. It was garbage, and then I read chapter 23. Total paradigm shift. Been using that term a lot today. Whether it's an email saying thank you so much, it's a tattoo, it's fan art. I know I certainly look forward to that sort of stuff, and I'm going to bust my ass to get to that point. Cool conversation as well, just about the idea of luck. And Tiger Woods quote that, it's strange how the harder I work, the luckier I get. Love that. And I really do believe that luck is just the intersection between hard work and opportunity, but you have to be there to take advantage of the opportunity. You can't be sitting on the sidelines watching everybody else play the game. You got to throw your hat in the ring, to mix metaphors. So where can you find Ryan on the internets? Twitter, r_Cahill author. Instagram, Ryan Cahill author. Facebook, Ryan Cahill author. And like I mentioned at the top, his website is going to come as a shock to you. RyanCahillAuthor.com. And I should mention Cahill spelled Cahill. Definitely check out that mailing list, folks. RyanCahillAuthor.com/mailing list. You will get a free copy of his novella, The Fall, which is just so cool, so charitable. Ryan truly cares about sharing his stories, and this is a great opportunity for somebody who hasn't checked out the series, maybe to test the waters. I just want to thank you again for checking out the pod. I made a pledge to you at the top of the show, and I intend to stick to it, even if it makes me sound like a complete asshole or idiot, or a combination of the two. I'm going to flub, I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm glad people keep coming back to check out the show. Keep listening to amazing authors and their experiences. So again, if you're enjoying what you like, rate and review. You can find me at Sam Hale on Twitter, Instagram. I have a link tree. But in the meantime, thanks again for checking out the author's preface. And I mean this with 110% sincerity. Stay humble, folks.